we've kind of worked side by side, but not together. But we used to do 75, 80 homes a year, and now we look at somewhere around 2,000 apartments. So it keeps us busy. But the reason I'm here tonight is years ago, when it's 5-6 years ago now, up at Spencer, the city utility had somebody put together the plan. It was a good plan. They put in money. They helped get a housing project going. Spencer had no housing developed at all for the original use. All of a sudden, they had 20, 30 homes a year ago. And that has continued. They still have pretty robust growth up there. It's not even what it was when the city was promoting this as much. But the city decided they wanted housing. Now, I think everybody's got one of the brochures that I handed out. And in the front of this brochure, we've got a little bit about healthy, efficient homes. I built the first net zero home in Iowa, and that was at Spirit Lake. And the first one I built was for myself in Grand Rapids, probably the most popular one I built. But on the back half of that, it's just in talking points. And everybody in here is from a small community. And I grew up in a town, when I was there, it was 1,100 people. Today it's about 900. I can go back.
Scott, we're not hearing a word he's saying.
All right. I'll move the microphone a little bit closer and encourage you.
Well, I'll just go stand over by that microphone.
Yep. Great.
You can do that too. We'll just move this thing right over. Is that better?
Yep. Keep on talking then, and we'll.
Okay. But anyway, I grew up in a town. 1,100 people was my dad, my uncle lived this street about 5 houses to the north. There's an aunt that lived just across town from the school. My brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother all graduated from high school together. My brother-in-law's family, his mom and dad lived next door with us. So small town living has changed drastically. We're having a hard time maintaining populations, and the towns that are able to maintain populations are the lucky few. Problem with maintaining population is a town really needs to add about 5% of their housing stock every year just to maintain. When you look at some of the top shelf, Eagle Construction Line there and putting a bunch of, they probably have 60 to 70 apartments up there. Well, that's 60 to 70 homes. That's families living in that town. Sheldon's growing because of that. Problem is that most towns either have the right size that somebody will come in with that apartment, or the city itself generates that rental property. And we've worked on several towns that are doing that, from Mountain Lake, Minnesota to Canton, South Dakota to, there are several towns that have community-owned housing, and they use them for rental. The problem with that comes in that usually the city rents are quite low. And so when the city gets into the rental business, generally discourage any individual from coming in there because the rents are too low and you can't make money on low rents. The last few years, the nicest project we did was up in Storm Lake. It was 8 houses. It took a while to get the investor up there working with them. And then we went from there to Denison, and now Woodbury County had a disaster area. They were in a disaster, money allocated for it. And so we've got a project started in Woodbury County. And that's kind of what I'm here tonight for, is because individually, with Iowa Finance, you have to have a minimum of 4 homes. And 4 homes, if you have a town of 1,000 people, you need 3 years to build it, you might not do it. But you might be able to do 1 house. And if you get 4 towns in a county, they're in an economic area together, and combine those towns, all of a sudden you can get your minimum 4 homes or 5 or 6 homes. Or in Woodbury's case, we're hoping to put together 18 to 25 next year. But going city by city, while that works, it takes a lot of effort and time to develop that relationship one by one. Or if we can go into a regional area and work with towns that are wanting to get something done, it saves us a lot of time. And we can put together projects that otherwise couldn't be done. If, you know, in South County, if 4 homes would be a problem, you know, then you just won't do it, period. But 4 homes in the total county does not seem like an awful stretch. It should be achievable. You know, when I was growing up, it took us forever to go from Westbrook, Minnesota. Every year we go down to the Poconos and we have a picnic down there. And it was an all-day drive back and forth. Now you can drive down there and have lunch and do that for watching a football game at 3 o'clock. And so this is what's happening. Roads have gotten so much better. Now we're not competing against Overboard or anybody else as far as we want housing. Now you're competing against Sioux City or Fort Dodge. And as a result, it gets harder and harder for small towns to make this work out. And as that, like I said, I never try to go into saying, hey, we're going to become a builder in your town. No, if you've got a builder in your town, let him do the custom homes that people want. That's not our goal with our health efficient homes. Our goal is to provide affordable housing. And affordable housing, I hate to say it, you know, is not the numbers that were there 10 years ago. They're twice as high as they were 10 years ago. And the houses aren't that much bigger. But people want nicer things. People want bigger all the time. And as a result, you've got to have the right tone to put a Iowa finance project together. You can't go into a town of 1,200, 2,000 people and make that work. But if you get 4 towns of 2,000 people or 1 house per town, now all of a sudden you've got a project that you can present to. And that's kind of what I'm here tonight for, is to see the interest that if we could develop that up. Now, in your brochure, we've got a lot of talking points. And they range from wages up until 1970, all through the 50s and 60s. The wage in rural Iowa was pretty close to what it would be in Des Moines or Sioux City. Today, you're probably 30% less on average. Housing stock in most of these towns, the housing was built in the 50s, 60s, and by the 70s, it really slipped off. And so we're looking at minimum of 70 years old for an average house in most of the towns today. They were built in 1950. That's 70 years ago. If you get a town with, you know, any type of growth at all, it's hard to raise that up. And when you're looking at towns with 50-year-old homes on average, generally speaking, they're going to have a lower market value. And so when the assessor comes in and does an appraisal for tax-wise, they come in and everybody gets the same basic house cost. If you have a 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, your house starts off at the same value for tax purposes as everybody else's. But then they have what they call a market adjustment. And then the market adjustment brings you the value in affordable lower than Sioux City or whatever county or whatever they're talking about for the market area. And so we have to combat a lot of things with this project. And one of the things that you combat is you don't know what it's going to sell, and you don't know how long it's going to sell. The risk factor is great. That's why people don't do it. You've got to have some pretty heavy commitments from communities that want to get housing. You know, you're not going to find a white knight coming in and building 20 homes. You'll find somebody that'll come in and build a house, you know, a retired guy who wants to impact the town I grew up in. They do have that retired guy and every year builds 1 or 2 houses. And they've got to stabilize the population with about 900 people. Now, what makes that town? This is a nice progressive looking town. What makes Westbrook a good town is it's the smallest town in Minnesota that still has a hospital. And they've got a fantastic retirement home, assisted living right across the street. It's about a square block. It's over by Sanford. Well, Sanford owns the hospital group, and so we've got to build in clientele. But not every town can have it. That's the only thing they have going. And when I was there, every store downtown was busy, streets were busy. Today, most of the buildings are gone, over half at least. It's not the same time. And it's harder and harder to make these small towns. What do you do to get something going? Well, you try and find a business to come to a small town. But why do they want to come to a small town if there's no living? And then we start looking, okay, in South County, we've got 9 or 10 towns that we can draw from, or 4 or 5 towns that we can draw from. How many of those people want to drive 25 or 30 miles to work? And so there's a lot of challenges. And so personally, I think housing is one of the things that communities should look at from an economic standpoint. A workforce will bring people, it'll bring children to the school. Every time you get a new child in school, you've got $6,500 in state and federal money spent. Hopefully you get some big families. The other part of that is all of a sudden you have somebody come in to look at your town with 10 or 12 or 15 jobs. Now they know that there's actually some people that they can bring to town and find to work, and they don't have to recruit from 30 miles around. I've worked with Jackson, Minnesota. It's a town of about 4,000 people. Extremely good base of industry. They probably have, it's over 50% driving from 30 miles away. They're coming from Storm Lake, or not Spirit Lake, up to Jackson to work in the factories. It's people drive, but the only reason they do is they can't find anything. They don't have the affordable housing. You can rent something, but they don't have anything that a guy making $18, $20 an hour makes a good wage, but he's not going to afford the $400,000 home that gets built there. And the only people building that $400,000 home are the retired people that want that nice big 3,000 square foot home. If you think that a developer is pretty, I can go in and say, I can build a home, and I don't have to come in with one dime down because I take the plans into the bank, they get an appraisal you want to, and then they give 80%, 75% more of the value. And whenever you're building a house, if you don't show a 30% profit to the bank, they're not going to talk to you. It's too risky of a thing. And so if you can come in and you can show them, that the house that we're doing in Correctionville, our basic cost, and that was right at $200,000, appraisal $243. Now, when we get $243, I don't do this. Can we get $225? We've got tax credits, so if we get $210, we're okay because we've got the tax credits for profit. But you can't depend on tax credits, and sometimes you just don't know what it's going to sell for. And so the risk factor is high, and we're looking to find partners in the communities that really want to. How do we jumpstart our towns? How can we get a few houses built that people can actually come into town and live and afford to live? If we look at our brochure, Healthy Efficient Homes, I am an Energy Star rater. We rate numerous houses in commercial buildings. And so everything we do is extremely energy efficient. The walls, we wrap the whole house with R5 insulation at the top of the R21. So, the board requires an R20. We've got R26. Our ceilings, we can get by with R38. We've got R49. Our windows are better. Our heating equipment is far superior to what most people use. So we could build a home for $10,000 cheaper without any problem. But when you're looking at $200,000 for a cost, what's $10,000? Especially when that $10,000 will pay for itself in about 5 to 7 years. Now, if you have a house that you spend $10,000 more, but every 5 years that $10,000 pays for itself, in 20 years that house has made you $30,000. That's what it's aging. Can we build a cheaper house and cost more money to live in? Oh, definitely. But this is not the time to do that. We've got COVID problems, we've got cheap taxes today, but who knows what they're going to be like tomorrow. You've got to have an affordable house, and affordable means being able to live in it. It doesn't do any good for a family to go and buy a home if you can't afford the maintenance on it monthly. The other part of that is not just the monthly cost there, but they have to have a home that they can feel comfortable in, we've got air exchangers at every house, we put radon fans in every house. You know, we try and have the healthiest house possible. Now, last fall in my finance meeting, they were talking about housing needs across Iowa. There are literally no housing for senior citizens wanting to downsize. It's just impossible to find homes that they can move into. You know, if Mrs. Jones has a 2.5, 3-story 1910 house on the corner, it's a nice house, but no, she can't go up and down the steps. So what does she do? She sleeps on her couch. She has no place to go unless she leaves town, and that happens way too often. People have spent 50 years in the town, and they've got to move 25 miles because they can no longer live in their house. These problems can be solved, but it takes effort from everybody. If as a builder, banks have a tendency to say we want everything that is collateral that we possibly give us. And so if I tie up my assets, I can do one town. I could go to Storm Lake and build houses, but I couldn't go to Denison and build houses because the bank down there says, well, Jim, what are you going to give us? I'm not going to give you anything because Citizens Bank already got it. What are we going to do here? And so then you can't do anything. And so Denison made us a great offer. We started an opportunity zone down there. They have a very high mill rate. And so their taxes are quite high. With high taxes, they can incentivize us to build a house. Now, if you have a low mill rate, if your taxes are $1,000 a year versus $5,000, another time, go to Storm Lake. 5 years in Storm Lake, it's $45,000. 5 years in, Salem, it's $5,000. There's not much you can do with it. And so tax incentives can help. I tell everybody, every time we're talking to somebody, I say, do never give a tax abatement to somebody. If they want to build a custom home, a tax abatement is probably enticing because they can live in that house tax-free for 5, 7, 10 years over the sell. But as a builder, it doesn't have one dime of that. And so what Denison did is they, instead of giving the tax abatement, they gave the money to us to incentivize us to build houses. And so that means we can go in there and build a house with good cash, and it reduces our risk, and it gets the town a new house. Now, people start paying tax, but they also buy a house cheaper than they would have otherwise, because we've got our profit in the taxes that we receive. And when you work with the Iowa Finance, if any of you had it, roughly speaking, we can make about $30,000 in tax credits off of the house. Now, you're not going to, I wish I could pay $30,000 in taxes. It isn't going to happen. So you have to sell those. And when you sell those tax credits, you're not going to get $30,000. But you do get money. And it is an incentive to build a house. In Storm Lake, the house is also for more than we built it for. So it was a win-win situation. We sold the house. I still think we sold it too cheap. But we sold all the houses as fast as we built them. We've got our tax credits now in the bank, and it turned out to be a really good project. But let's go to Shaler, Iowa. I've been in Shaler, Iowa since from the 70s. I was there at least once or twice a year, buying 40 cans Midwestern Supply. Now I get there once a year to do some traction. But that was a nice, vibrant town in 1970. And it's not quite so vibrant anymore. It's a nice town. People love to live there. But I would guess that most people living there will probably be moving back and forth to Storm Lake. Now, to justify doing that, if you can go to Storm Lake and buy a house for $200,000, say a new house, little split for it, what does it take to drive that 20 miles from Shaler to Storm Lake? It costs money to drive that every day. It's the inconvenience of driving that every day. And so the house in Shaler does have to sell for this. Now, can it sell for cost? Maybe not. And that's where the incentives come. If we can get the right incentives, and each town's going to be different. It's kind of like when the assessor comes in and looks at the mill rates. Your mill rate's low, your mill rate's a little higher, yours is really high, who wants to do that? But then they get that little market adjustment. And now all of a sudden, you're not quite so dissatisfied with your tax bill. It works kind of like that with us too. You know, it's one of those things. If you're in a town that's got a vibrant business community, they've been building $100,000 or $300,000 homes a year. That doesn't help the families that we get most of our houses into. Now, in the last ones we've done in Storm Lake, we're basically a zero entry home, totally handicap adaptable, and that's what we did in Denison also. Now in Correctionville, we've done the same thing. In Salem, we're doing a 3-bedroom. Now it is a zero entry, but it's a 3-bedroom. It's a little bit bigger, and reason being, we'll probably get somebody out of Sioux City to move into that house. And 3 bedrooms probably sells better than a 2-bedroom. The next ones we're going to do in Denison are either going to be a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom. And I think the minority groups that are buying houses today, 10 years ago, they were very happy to get a $50,000 house. Today, they'll pay $250,000 per house. They have the money to buy a $200,000 house without much problem. 10 years ago, they didn't. But they have families. And how many white young families do you see with 2 and 3 kids? They don't have time. They're too busy doing other things. And so you've got to look at who's going to be buying the houses. You've got to look at, are you going to be looking at an aging population? Are you going to be looking at if you have a disabled mother or father, you go find them a home within 50 miles of here that they have totally handicapped accessible. You'll be lucky if you can find one. There is a demand, there's a need, there's just a big supply. And we'd like to work with the communities, we'd like to work with the county and put together a program that we can kind of use the input from the city. What do we need? We've got Lakeview that's getting a few nice big homes every year. But when's the last time anybody built a home that a young family making $20 an hour can afford? And the thing is, if you can, I still think that the solid thing is to go for the downsizing of the older families, and that clears up that 3-story, 6-bedroom house that somebody with 5 kids needs. And it would be 5 kids on a $140,000 house, $120,000 house that they can easily afford. It may cost them a lot of utilities, but they can afford it for their family. And so we started doing 4-bedroom split quarters. You don't see a lot of split quarters being built. But when we did those up at Storm Lake, they sold just as fast as we built them. And then we went to a couple other things. But the last thing we've done up there is 0 entries. But we just didn't have the lots for those families with the split quarters. It's a house style that you don't see much anymore. But they were a great house style 10 years ago and 20 years ago because they offered 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. Today, everybody wants the multi-levels, 3 stories and 14 gables and 5,000 square feet. Well, that's not what we do. We're gonna stick to our goal is to provide affordable housing. Our goal is to help communities maintain. I don't think we're gonna make Lakeview grow building houses. It's going to take more than a few houses. But if we can help them maintain the population they have today, that's a plus. If we can help a community, if they're having somebody looking at coming into the area with new industry, it might only be 10 people. But 5, 10 people jobs is probably better than one 50-person job. I take the 10 any day of the week because 8 of them are going to survive. You take 1 to 50, and who knows what happens? We get COVID for a year, and they could be out of business tomorrow. When I first met Brandy, it was because of Justin Erickson in Minneapolis. He is part of an economic development organization. She belongs to it, and he introduced us. And we've had this conversation for 5 or 6 years now of what comes first, housing and families and people, or do you try and get a business with no housing and families? You know, does somebody want to come to your town if the people can't live it? If they can drive. Fort Dodge has had big business of building homes this last couple of years. There's been a lot of homes built over there. And I think they're all going to a meat packing plant 30 miles away. They're not, you know, the town that got the meat packing plant, I don't think it's getting much of a bonus. My great grandparents came from Wallafile. That town's, you know, 2 stores and an empty lot. Pocahontas is much better. It's a nice town, but their save date is so bad that they need to do something to kickstart. And you can't go into Pocahontas and do a project because you just can't take that kind of risk. And the community doesn't want it. A community can risk 1 house. You can't risk 5. And that's why if we can go by the cones, we can minimize the risk not only for us, but also for the community. There's certain ways to raise money. And we've talked about it, we've kicked it around. You don't want to work with banks if you don't have to. Ideally, you can work with a community, housing authority, whatever. And there are options. And tell you, we're just gonna set in groundwork and hopefully we can meet with people. And when they have an idea that, hey, we would like to do something, Randy and I'll set up a time and we'll sit down and we'll visit with these committees to see, okay, what can we really do here to make this happen? Because you need the houses, that's not the problem. How do we get the houses? And nobody wants to risk. I can't afford risk. The towns can't afford much risk. They do get a house that's going to be there for, you know, houses built in 1950 or so. So, you know, 50 years from now, this house that you helped build is still going to be there, hopefully 80 years or 100 years. And it's still going to be economically viable to live in. And so we can provide certain things, but we can't provide all the things. Whoa, that was expensive. Got hit by lightning. But we, you know, the financing is the issue. It always is an issue. And it doesn't matter if it's an industry, you know, making gadgets for race cars. It's financing is always a key issue. And housing is probably a bigger issue. For the simple reason it's a lot of money on one takeoff. If you have the tax base that the house gets, you have some people, it does work. And we can show people that it works. We'd love to have anybody come through and say, you know, you're not that far from Denison. We'll gladly walk you through the twin home down there. Gladly show you the Correctionville house. Luckily, we've got a great winter. We started sailing. In fact, we just moved equipment to sail this today. We'll start. We've been debating. I haven't pulled the trigger on moving dirt tomorrow yet because of the possibility of snow. And no matter what I do, it's going to be wrong. But I don't think I'm doing all that. But whoever is, that's okay. But it's one of those things that I saw a little quote the other day. Is, you know, it doesn't really matter. You're always right. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're always going to be correct. And it's the same thing on the housing in the communities. If you think you can do it, let's try and do it. If you don't think you can do it, hey, we don't need to. You know, we're not any further ahead not doing it. There's no risk in not doing something. The only risk that not doing something is that the community becomes more stagnant. It never helps to have no housing. It never helps to have people leaving town. You know, it's one of those things. You know, I wonder if that's what it is. I think we're getting a backbeat on the speakers. But, you know, I go back to the town I grew up at, Westbrook, Minnesota. A great town. I have many fond memories of living. I've got a lot of in-laws that have lived there. And we've got uncles and aunts and everybody else in between living in the same town. Everybody knows who you were in. That never happens anymore. And so when I started this with the affordable housing thing, it's not, you're not going to make a lot of money doing this because it's a lot of driving and a lot of time between towns. But if we can help a town stabilize, if you get lucky and you can help a town grow a little bit, I think we'll succeed in what we set out to do. So I'm gonna let this back to Brandy. If there's anybody with questions, like I say, what we did tonight is just kind of wet the pump a little bit so that if the town says, hey, what can we really do? We've got ideas what you can do. It's just a matter of how bad you want to do it. Thank you. And I'll give that back to you.
Thanks, Jen. Does anybody have any questions for Jim? Now?
Yeah, because, but I say, before you leave, you talk about financing always being the issue. What type of financing or just general help as assistance in general from any of the communities? Well, give me some examples about how you've had success.
Okay, Correctionville is close to Sioux City. Everybody drives to Sioux City. They gave us a lot. They gave us $5,000 for every house. If you go to Sheldon, Iowa, Sheldon develop, and I'll tell anybody, don't try and develop lots to build houses on. It's a losing proposition. Sheldon has their cost. They had a $25,000 price on the city-owned lots. Now they give $10,000 to the buyer of the lot to build a house. Denison, I don't know if I would mind it. They give us a substantial. When we did the project in Denison, Iowa Finance had stopped their tax rate, and so Denison, because they've got a very high tax rate, was able to supply us with a good deal of money on every house we built. And it doesn't totally take care of the tax rates in Iowa State, but it's probably better in the fact that it's cash and we don't have to wait 3 years to get it. But most towns that are getting housing are doing something. Like I say, in Spencer, I know their utility, their total thing came to roughly $15,000, but when they first started doing it, I'm thinking the utility might have even borrowed the money and guaranteed the loan to do those houses. And, all those houses made them money. They didn't, that guaranteeing the loan in Spencer, I think was probably a pretty good jump start for them. I think.
What does that mean that they guaranteed the loan?
I
That it's just
think
it's just the
utility
developer
actually
directly?
Are you talking about the one south of Walmart? Is that the one?
This would be the ones over by the south of Walmart, the second bunch that they did. Josh put those in. I worked on all 23 of those. But the first bunch they did were just to the east, and it was by the golf course. And those sold for a little bit less. But that was the first thing that they took into it. And on that one, I think the utility might have guaranteed or borrowed the money for the building. But they were very active in that one.
So whose loan are you guaranteeing? The developer's construction loan?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's what the utility, I believe. Like I said, when Josh got involved with the second phase up there, they'd sold out that first one, and I think that had about 36 homes, and they did it in about 4 years. Now, before that, I don't think Spencer averaged 2 houses a year for the previous 10 years. They had nothing. And now they've had a very big boom in housing. And you go to the north side of town, and you've got a lot of big fancy homes going. There's plans, I believe, to do another one of the more affordable ones. But what they is, that's a town that you can sell a house. And when I say sell a house, when you don't have any houses in a town, it's hard to get a market value. The houses the split quarters that we did in Storm Lake 4 years ago, I guess now, those houses today would probably go a minimum of $20,000 more. When those were done, we thought 190 was the top, and we put them at 185. Today, those would be 250 minimum. Same house, same everything. Cost has gone up a little bit, but not that to that degree. And so once you get some new housing, it kind of jumpstarts everything. And when Joe Abbey up there, when he saw that Steve and I were building houses and selling houses, well, then Joe gets into it. And now this year, I think Joe did 10 or 11. And all spec houses. And he's getting them sold as soon as they get done. And so putting up a few homes in the right community goes a long way. Now, they've got a great job market up there. They've got a lot of people moving, so they've got a need for housing, especially that 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. And Joel, that's all he's doing is the split quarters basically. And then we stay with the 2-bedroom handicap adaptive houses and getting the older couples to come in. But next year, hopefully we'll get our tax credits back in Storm Lake again. And then we'll be doing a little, we'll be pushing the envelope a little bit down there as far as prices.
So what are the tax credits that you're dealing with?
Well,
Workforce housing tax credit?
No, the Iowa Finance has a program that basically you get $30,000. If you have $150,000 of cost in a house, you're going to get 20% tax credit. That's an Iowa state tax credit, so it's $30,000. And then you get your sales tax refund. And so the risk to a builder is really reduced. You can afford to sell a house for a few thousand less than it costs. The only problem is that you don't get that money when the house sells. The whole project has got to be done before you see the money. And so when you do if for instance, let's say in Woodbury County next year, we say, oh, we're going to do 40 houses, and we do 12 houses a year. In 3 years, we finally hit our 40 house. Well, it's going to take in excess of a year before you get that money. So now you're out there 4+ years before you can see any profit from that first house. So it's a good incentive to do it, but it doesn't guarantee you can't use that as your profit. You've got to make enough to survive until your profit actually comes in. That's what I'm trying to say.
So when you do these tax credits, you apply to Iowa Finance Authority for a project?
That's right. You put a project together. Brandy would help put that project together and write a letter of support. The community has to be actively promoting that. And it's not bringing dollars really that is required. Storm Lake, the Storm Lake, there might have been $5,000 in incentives from Storm Lake. It's a very, very low threshold. So for the city involvement on the tax credit side of it is a very low amount. If you put up a lot and say, hey, we're just, give them a free lot, well, that immediately is going to get you even if that's over. And I mentioned lots. I always will encourage towns to use infill lots. And the reason being, small towns have a tendency that they have some nice houses, and they have some houses that probably could use some tear down, to say the least. And an infill lot will increase the value in the neighborhood. Hopefully it gets the neighbors also getting their homes fixed up a little bit. But there's a lot of advantages to an infill lot. The city already has the land. If you get a house back for taxes, for instance, it's ideal for using the second program. Both Salix and Correctional Davis lots, they're both infill lots. Hopefully we get, Salix has got a couple other ones that we're hoping that they can line up in the next year. But to go and invest in, if you have to buy new land and have to put in streets and infrastructures, then it gets to be a really expensive proposition. It's better to keep the sites a little bit lower. And instead of, I would tell any town, don't go and develop 10 lots and have to take a big discount on selling those lots. Use that money better, improve the town as a whole, and that means using an infill lot and getting a new home into it and make the whole block look better. Every town has areas that can be fixed up. I don't know if you can use a community block grant to get money to help take some of those houses and get rid of some of the problems that arise. The city can borrow money out of bond to finance a house. They can raise money to, like Dempsey has, through their taxes. But again, if you have a low mill rate, you can't raise much money. So I believe we should raise the taxes, but if you have, there's a nice thing, it's nice to live in a town with low taxes. The problem is your town doesn't have much money to work with. It's hard to find money if you have no tax base to get it from. And there are ways to get those monies. And I think if a person could, we're not a nonprofit, but Kyle and Miller up at Lake Corridor, they have a nonprofit housing. They have so much more flexibility than we have. When we work with towns that have their housing, I think every one of those are nonprofit towns set up to run those apartments. I don't think any of them are, I know they're all nonprofits that they run through those. But I would assume they've got a housing authority over here that gets involved with that also.
That's some of our communities have their own.
And so, it's one of those things that a person just has to figure out, okay, how bad do we want to do it? What can we do? And then really start looking, okay, this works for our community. Not everything is.
So when you look at developing a project, and maybe you look countywide, and you get 4 or 6 homes countywide, you're developing a project for tax credits.
Exactly.
All right, that makes perfect sense.
Yep. And, like I say, we just want to minimize all the risk. Because the benefits we give to our town are pretty good, but they don't offset the risk.
But you're usually getting the land given to you, the lots are given
Not
to you.
necessarily. In Storm Lake, we bought all those lots, but we bought them very reasonable. Denison, we bought lots. Again, we paid for the lots. And again, they were a reasonable price, I thought. I think we've got Storm Lake, the lots we put the split foyers on, we paid $6,000 a lot. The lots in Denison, I'm trying to think, it was $64,000 for 5. So, whatever that comes. And then, like I said, in Salix and Correctionville, those were infill lots the city had to give to us so that we would build a new house. And I think you come out, the one in Salix, I know somebody wanted to move in an older home for rental purposes, and they opted to have a new home go in there instead.
So do you know the legalities about that, about the city giving property to you as a for-profit developer?
We haven't had any issue with anybody who brought it up.
Really? Okay.
Nope. Nobody's,
But everywhere you've done that, you've gone through a housing authority.
no, we haven't. We've always, up until now, we've always done it through investors. And at one point, we were actually talking about, if you bring in investors, they're going to want 12, 14, maybe even 15%. If the city comes in and they do a bond, they're going to be getting money for 2, 3, 4%, give it to you for 5 or 6. Well, all of a sudden you've got a house that can sell for substantially less money because you don't have the interest cost. And you really have to look at, in most small towns, how fast is the house sell? That's the key. If you can build them and sell them as fast as you build them, then the interest isn't such a big deal. But if you have to sit on that house for 10 months or 9 months or a year and a half, hopefully not, at what point do you bring the price down? And at what point does it get less than the sales cost? And those are the things that have to be looked at, because that's where the risk factor comes in. If you build a house and the cost is $200,000 and sell it for $185,000, I think anybody would agree that a $5,000 loss on that house is a pretty good investment for the community, being that you get a new family in town, and the first kid that goes to school in that house is going to bring $6,000 to you. So, I mean, it's very easy to justify a small amount. Where the risk comes in is, okay, we're going to do this house, and all of a sudden there's no buyers for it because our buyers want a bigger house, or they want a smaller house, or they want this, or they want that. And so we try and keep everything as neutral as possible. I don't think anybody's going to look at the stuff down in Denison. It's a good looking place. The stuff up in Storm Lake is great looking. I especially like the one we just doing in Correctionville right now. It's a cute house. The Salix one is based on that one, just a bigger example of it. And so, you know, we try to do the best we can as far from an energy conserving standpoint, but you've got to have street attraction. And I think we do a good job with the street attraction. I don't think anybody ever looks at one of our houses and say, oh, that's a cheap home. No, it isn't. They're a good looking, we could definitely drop the price of the house if we wanted to cheapen the house up. But it's not something that, it's not something I would do, quite frankly. You've got to give something that's going to be lasting a long time and people will enjoy living in it a long time.
So when you talk about your investors and the banks hopefully are last option.
Yep.
So do you have investors lined up? Do you rely on the communities to
Well,
come up with investors? What's the good plan there?
we've got a good solid base of investors in Sioux City for the Woodbury County stuff. They want to do more houses, but in Woodbury County, let's just say. We haven't really done a good, we have not needed to up to this time, really go out and try and put together an investor program. But that doesn't mean I've got access to two very good people, Justin Erickson being one. Justin had talked to him, he said, hey, you know, the idea behind this, if Brandy or Tom or Peter, whomever is in the economic development area, if they give a list of names of potential investors, bring them together at a table, set them down and say, hey, this is good for the town. What, do you want to help your town survive? Do you want to help it thrive? If so, you know, we're looking for an investment. And again, most people in Lakeview are not going to want to put up a house in Shalem. That's not, you know, that's where the investors become a problem because you can talk to, you know, Storm Lake, we could find some investors. And I think within a day we have a group put together, quite frankly. Denison, I think we could put one together, but it might take a little bit long. But we haven't needed that yet. And so we haven't gone that route of investors. And again, to get the investor, the banks are going to charge 70% interest on the labor. Investors are going to want to get a 14% return. You don't have all the closing costs and everything that you would have with the bank. And so that, you know, 14% to the investors might be the same as 7.5% to a bank just because of the lack of costs. But it could go either way. It really depends on the area. And again, like I say, if you go in and say, hey, we're going to do it, do you want to try and get, you're going to work with 5 towns. Do you really want to go through the headache of trying to find money from 5 different groups? You know, that's where it gets to be a problem. And so that's the biggest hold up there is trying to figure out the best way to do it. We've made enough mistakes to know what not to do. And then every time you do one, you find out you could have done something better. And like I said, if we can ever figure out a way to get by Woodbury County, the investors are not the issue because there's a substantial amount of money and it's quite easy to get. But once you get away from there, it does get to be a little tougher. If there's a housing authority, I know there's a housing project that was done in Eastern Iowa. One of the community development groups did it, and they went out and just raised a lot of money through businesses, through utilities, through everybody, and they brought their costs down about $45,000 a house. That's what we saw. And so they were selling houses, you know, about $45,000 less than they had a cost to build on, and it was all grant money that was given to them to put up this group of houses. So there are ways to do it. You just have to get creative. Well, if there's no more questions and nobody on there has any questions, I'll let you say goodnight for everybody. Thank you.
Anybody with old new business? Chris?
I do have one comment though, John. just that the, pertaining to the league, the Omaha Sports Show has been canceled this year, so we won't be going to the Omaha Sports Show.
Chris, did you motion to adjourn?
I did.
Vicky, did you second? Vicky, you did?
Yeah.
All those in favor, good night. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the Zoom, people.
All right, thanks everybody online. I tried to record this, we'll see if it works.
Sure, everyone-
Sharon and Tammy and